The Arizona Diamondbacks are fighting for their lives right now. They're headed to a game 6 in the NLCS, and they're being led by star catcher Gabriel Moreno. A lot of Blue Jay fans are unhappy that he has just been crushing the ball this postseason, and this trade is looking worse and worse by the day, according to most Jays fans. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Now, the Arizona Diamondbacks have been playing phenomenal baseball. They're a team that only won 84 or 85 games in the regular season, and they've really hit their stride here in the post. Now, they're being led by Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte, and Gabriel Moreno has been one of their best players and one of the better players in this year's postseason for all teams as well. I mean, he's really found his power stroke in the postseason. He's been driving in some clutch runs, and a lot of Blue Jay fans are seeing this hot stretch of play without necessarily following him throughout the regular season. And now they're very quick to call the trade a failure. I know that Daulton Varsho had a down year. He wasn't what we expected when it comes to the offensive side of things, but defensively, he was one of the best players in all of baseball. He's probably going to be the everyday center fielder next year for the Toronto Blue Jays. And there are things to look forward to when it comes to Daulton Varsho. This was a win-now move. It could age poorly for the Toronto Blue Jays, but the goal is to win within the next couple of years. However, if the Diamondbacks win before the Blue Jays do, then I think the fan base has a legitimate gripe.
Yeah, Ross Atkins is being hated on even more than he was a couple weeks ago when he made those comments. They're pretty similar amount. Fans are not happy with him. They're not happy with the Blue Jays, but forgetting all that, make sure to subscribe button. We're on the road to 10,000. We just hit 9,500. Your support's been unbelievable, so make sure to hit the button if you haven't already. Now we're going to break down the trade and break down the recent comments because this has kind of come back to light after Gabriel Moreno has turned into a beast in the playoffs despite a fairly decent regular season. So let's rewind a little bit back to December 2022 when the Toronto Blue Jays and Arizona Diamondbacks have made a trade. The Diamondbacks got Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and top prospect Gabriel Moreno in exchange for versatile outfielder and catcher at the time, Daulton Varsho. Now, when this trade went down, most Jays fans, I think, understood the reason why. We all knew coming into this trade, and we had a live stream about it. We had tons of videos about it when it happened. But there was a chance that this backfired heavily for the Blue Jays if Gabriel Moreno turns into an all-star that we know he's capable of becoming. That being said, Varsho also, it was a mix of the worst possible case scenario for the Blue Jays, front office at least from an optical point of view. And Shapiro stands by it, saying it was a good trade on the Blue Jays. Shapiro doesn't regret losing Moreno, which that's a little bit of a twisted headline. He doesn't regret losing Moreno. He just said that he's happy that he traded for Varsho. Who knows if there's actually regret there, but we'll get into all the stats and stuff. But first, Peter, people on Twitter are going absolutely crazy. You can see people, you just Google Moreno on Twitter, and it's all the Jays got fleeced, reason why Ross Atkins sucks. Michael Kay, the Yankees announcer and broadcaster, said the trade will not age well for Toronto. Moreno's a flat-out star, and he's just 23. Tough to give up a young catcher like that. Twitter in Jays universe is turning on Ross Atkins. They've already turned on him, but he's under fire by the media and the fans as well.
Yeah, well, if you're the Blue Jays, you had no choice but to trade Moreno if you were going to deal one of the catchers. You're not going to trade Jansen because he's probably the best player of the three and someone that you need around here. You're not going to trade Alejandro Kirk because he doesn't have the same amount of value and won't fetch you as great a player as Gabriel Moreno. I mean, this whole trade has looked worse and worse and worse because Danny Jansen wasn't able to stay in the lineup, because Alejandro Kirk had a very down year and wasn't that all-star that he has been in the past couple of seasons, you know? So all you need is for these players to play like they're supposed to, and then the trade works out for Toronto. I mean, if Daulton Varsho positively regresses to like a league average hitter with his amazing defense, what are we even talking about here? I mean, that's a player that's going to help out the Blue Jays a lot more than Gabriel Moreno would. I don't know how much playing time he would have gotten this season.
Not well, a little bit, but
and
not
I
much.
know he's looking great. He's looking great right now in Arizona, and he's looking like the catcher of their future, but the Jays dealt from a position of strength. And the only way I saw Gabriel Moreno getting in there was for a Danny Jansen injury, an Alejandro Kirk injury. That's the only way I saw him crack in the lineup, because teams don't carry three catchers unless maybe one of them can't run, and then you want a third catcher. But look, I think the Jays the way that they made this trade was fine. I think the process behind it was good as well. It was the right move to make. You had to deal from one of your catchers because that was your best position last year, and you had to upgrade your outfield, and you did. You did. Maybe you wish Varsho played a little bit better, but I'm going to stand by this. I think this is going to work out. If the Jays don't win in the next couple of years, sure, call it a failure, but you got to give it a bit more time than this.
Yeah, it's definitely too early. And, at the time, like we said, we knew that this was a possibility. Obviously, we're still 1 year into this trade. And as this man on Twitter says right here, and this kind of blew up a little bit, this is kind of the way I see it to a degree. Says, basically calls out the complainers of the trade. Obviously, now with hindsight, it doesn't look great, but at the time, it made sense. The process was right. And the big thing is, Moreno didn't have a spot on the team. He just did not. They weren't going to replace Kirk, who was coming off of a 128 OPS plus All-Star season. We needed outfield defense. We needed power, which Varsho gave, at least when we traded for him. It regressed a little bit this year. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense complaining about the trade at the time because we dealt from a position of strength. And Moreno, like you said, some people complain and say that, why didn't they give up Kirk in the trade for Varsho? That was never going to be an option. Moreno obviously has way more value than Kirk did, higher ceiling. And some people are also saying, well, why don't you trade Kirk for someone a bit, less good and then keep Moreno? That could have been an option, but I think the Jays are in win now mode, so they wanted to get the most value possible, especially when Kirk is such a solid catcher. It's not like he's a, horrible catcher or an amazing, crazy catcher. So it made the most sense to trade Moreno. We kind of knew it, and I think we got a good player back. The issue is that in hindsight right now, it doesn't look as great, but I think in a year or two, it'll all end up being a pretty even trade when it's said and done. Obviously, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. had a great year, but looking at Moreno, he finished with his 747 OPS, which is, decent. He has like minimal power. He's showing a bit more power in the playoffs, sorry. But in 341 at bats, just 7 home runs. And Peter's very, very good defensively in some ways, which is blocking and throwing the ball, but then he lacks heavily where Kirk shines and framing. So whatever you value more there. And then Varsho obviously had a pretty bad year himself, but the defense is always there. So I don't know. It's going to be a question that might haunt the Blue Jays for years going forward, but I think at the end of the day, you got to just let it play out, and maybe in a year or two, we'll make a video discussing how it was the biggest failure in Ross Atkins history.
It could be, and it could also not be in a couple of years' time. But I also think we don't have to discredit Gabriel Moreno as a player and nitpick what he does well and doesn't do well to make ourselves feel better about the trade. I think he's a great player. And the moment that this trade was announced, we were on record saying that he's going to be a great player for a long time. But as it stands right now, Daulton Varsho is probably the better player and probably the player that helps the Blue Jays in their ultimate goal of winning a World Series. Did it work out this year? No, not necessarily, because the Arizona Diamondbacks are still playing, and the Jays, I don't know what they're up to right now. Maybe they're golfing, maybe they're back home for the offseason, who knows? But they're not playing baseball. So, yeah, we got to give this more time. I think at the time of the trade, most Blue Jay fans were happy because they saw Daulton Varsho with his platinum glove level defense. They saw the 27 home runs in a pitcher-friendly ballpark in Arizona. And that's a player that you can work with 4 years of control, someone that can play multiple positions, that can catch as well. Didn't catch this year, but the versatility just jumps off the charts when you're looking at Daulton Varsho. And there's no way that he's worse with the bat next year. And don't take that as a challenge either, Daulton Varsho. Don't take that as a challenge. But I don't think there's any way that he underperforms the way that he did last year. There was a lot of pressure. He started hitting cleanup early on in the year with the Blue Jays. He was expected to be the guy right out of the gate. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. We saw Matt Chapman really struggle with the bat in his first year with the Blue Jays, hit under 230. And it was the same thing with Varsho. I saw same thing. Elite defense, really struggling with the bat, trying to make an impression on his new teammates. But next year, he knows his role on the team. He knows he's going to be that everyday guy. And he's just got to go out there and show them again why they traded for him and what kind of player that he really is. Because I really like him as a player, personally.
Yeah, I mean, Moreno was, probably the better player last year. But going forward for the Blue Jays, I'd even argue Moreno's going to be the better player going forward for the Blue Jays. Now, you can make the case about who's going to be the better player in the grand scheme of things. But like you said, for the Blue Jays going forward with their catching tandem, assuming they stay healthy, Varsho's a guy that I would rather have in this current Blue Jays construction. Now, that is putting trade value and future stuff behind, because the Jays need to win. Their core is getting they're not getting old, but some of the guys like George Springer, Kevin Gosse is not getting any younger. So they needed to win. They needed to make a move. And it's one that I think, like this guy said, in hindsight, it sucks right now. But deep down, I think it makes sense. I think most Jays fans would agree that ultimately you had to make the move if you were the Blue Jays. Maybe you don't trade Moreno and you go for someone else. But if that's the case, then you're probably not going to get as many good players. But any quick final thoughts before we wrap up?
I'm just wondering, for the people that don't like the trade, where exactly would you have played Gabriel Moreno this season if you were still a Blue Jay? You're going to play left field, right field, like that's what I don't understand. Obviously, we don't like the way that he's performing right now, and we wish that it was in a Blue Jay uniform, but it's not. He's gone. He's never going to be a Blue Jay again. But Daulton Varsho is a really good player, man. I truly believe that he's a great player. This guy does all the little things right, the base running, the fielding. I think he's really going to bounce back. I truly believe that he's going to bounce back with the bat next year, and that it's not going to be forgotten by any stretch. But I think fans are going to warm up to the idea of having Daulton Varsho man center field for the long haul, and I'm good with that personally.
Yeah, and maybe some people might respond to your comment, Peter, with they would have traded one of the other catchers, but the value would have been worse. And we'll let that up for debate. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. We'll definitely make sure to read them and respond. But thank you guys for watching. If you want to see my video from yesterday, click on the screen right now. We'll see you tomorrow.